All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Tuesday, April 2nd. So, second day of the month, and where did we finish? SPY finished right around flat, maybe a little bit of an end of the day profit taking going on there. We've been seeing that on some days. It's not every day, but a little bit of a 10 basis point move or something at the end of the day. So SPY finished flat. The outperformer today was the Qs. Nice outperformance there. They actually came in too just a little bit at the end of the day. You could see what the VIX did, which the VIX kind of grinded lower for the majority of the afternoon. A little bit of an uptick around 11 o'clock in the VIX, but finished 1336. We are getting very close to the 12 handle in the VIX, which really kind of tells you that the market is not pricing in short-term volatility, and but that can all change, right? We're getting to a pretty low level. I don't know if we get to that 12 handle. To me, that's a little bit scary that the market isn't pricing anything in, but we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. The VXN, you could see, also had that uptick at the end of the day. The VXN is the VIX for the Qs. Notice I have all three of these on the side of one of my monitors, so I could see at all times just to see if any volatility is moving into one of those three of those indices. Small caps were kind of, I mentioned that small caps continue to be kind of like a day trader's vehicle because they are moving pretty decently intraday. That we saw the IWM go down about 70 basis points, almost 1% at one point around like 10:30, 11 o'clock. Then rebounded, I think was close to flat and finished down 26 basis points. So continue to watch the small caps for any warning signs because they seem to be acting a little bit different and maybe a little bit more bouncy back and forth to the downside as well. So again, we'll be watching that for tomorrow. Today's option activity, if you notice, I don't tweet out option activity, maybe just one or two. I'm just not one of those guys on Twitter that's going to tweet every time that there's option activity. But we could certainly go over it, and I share it with the trading room as it occurs, and kind of give my thoughts on it as well. But one of the names that we saw, and I don't know why I don't have this on here, but AMD kind of came up multiple times. Sometimes I forget to transfer them to my sheet too. But AMD really interesting. This is my. I like to talk about some of the bad things that happen because I think number one, it happens to everyone, and you could probably from time to time have one of those days. But I was in AMD calls this morning, right off like the first 5 or 10 minute bar, because I saw AMD calls earlier today, and I tweeted it out to the private Twitter feed as well. Forgetting about these for a minute. But they just looked aggressive every time that they went up this morning. It looked like just more and more little bites. And I tweeted this out. We talked about I sent out, by the way, pre-market. Again, I don't put this on regular Twitter. This is for private Twitter. I put this basically what names I'm looking for. What names I have an eye on. Okta I've been looking at the last couple of days, which had a beautiful day today. Update in Baba, that's a trade that's not working. I provide my commentary there, not only on the winners, but the ones that are not working well. Yeah, so in here you can see I added to a trade that I put on yesterday in Okta. So this worked really nice today. But AMD, I talked about how we were seeing just little bites right around like 9:40 this morning, and they just carried through all day. And then you could see a pickup in volume, and there was more calls right into this move, and they get an upgrade at the end of the day. So sometimes they are onto something, or they do know something. But as I always say, one of the reasons that kind of brought me into this, and granted, I screwed this trade up completely today. I overtraded. I thought today was kind of a slowish day. And sometimes when it's a slower day, sometimes you just, I don't know, you get in your head and you do stupid things. You overtrade. So that's my story of the day, or my negative thing that I did today was just a bit of overtrading or over managing positions, and that happens to the best of us. But if that happens, don't get too over concerned. I'll forget about it in an hour. But I thought this chart looks pretty good in AMD, which is why I took it in the first place. The other thing that I did incorrectly with this was I was like, hey, I'm going to trade this as a day trade, and I just went into April calls. And if you know me, I don't hold April calls overnight. I don't own. I don't unless it's like purposely an overnight trade or it's a call spread. I will not purchase front month calls at this point. I view that more as gambling than anything else. So so there's no way that I would hold April AMD calls. So maybe that was a little bit of my error this morning too, in picking the wrong the wrong maturity. But I thought this chart looked pretty good, and also with the Bitcoin, just kind of put the Bitcoin move, put one and one together this morning. It was already kind of looking at AMD and Nvidia. So anyway, I always like to get the bad over with first in the video and talk about that, because again, it's not all rainbows and butterflies in trading. Everybody makes mistakes, and it's always a battle, a mental battle. So I like to share those stories with you. So we'll go on to some of the better things this today. What else did I talk about on the private Twitter this morning? I added SE. This was a name that we saw yesterday. So here's where it gets more fun. I purposely, sometimes when we have, today wasn't really a day where things were down, but I took advantage. SE was down about a percentage and a half, and that's kind of what I'm looking for is names that have been consolidating, names that may have been down a little bit tomorrow after yesterday's big action, with first of the month flows in full effect yesterday, but a little bit of a relief move down in the first 15 minutes this morning, and that's kind of where sometimes I like to attack a little bit when a name is down 1.5%, and a name especially that I've been trying to get into. I did that with Okta as well too. Okta started the day down, but SC, I like what's going on here. Yesterday, I don't think I talked about it in the video, but there were some nice calls. They added to open interest in C Limited. Again, this is I think a China play on software, if I'm not mistaken. Okta, we talked about how we've seen some repeat calls in this one, and I really like the chart. Again, for me, it's not just the option activity. It has to be, the technicals have to be something that I really, really like for me to take advantage of option activity. And I always structure my own trade around it. But Okta looked really good. Like I said, this morning kind of gave you an opportunity on this dip. That's where I bought this morning. And it finished on the damn highs of the day. So really happy with that performance. Another trade that we looked at today, which was from the weekend newsletter. I'll wait for Thinkorswim to adjust here. Again, another type software play. This one it had to get over 2 hurdles. So let's go to the daily chart first. Let's go to the videotape. Let's go to the daily chart first. After a good earnings report, it's been kind of just sitting in here. It's got to get over 2 things. Well, it did this and kind of failed for the day. But let's go. Let me go to the 5-minute bar first, because I like to look at the value areas first. And I put this trade on in here. Looks like it's down a little bit after hours, but I put this trade on in here the first time I had an alert go off on it. Which, by the way, I set alerts on every name that I have in the weekend newsletter. So it made it through here. Unfortunately, it kind of gave back those gains end of day. The second, and you could be late on some of these things. And I mentioned whenever I kind of get into what I call a preemptive trade, it's going to be for smaller size, but it's got to get through 41. Call it 41.50. That's the top of value on the 1 hour, and then possibly it could get to this VPOC. But I go over the Virgin Point of Controls VPOCs a lot. This is a good example of one. It is not active. Both of these are not active until price gets out of the range. Right now it's in value. These do not become active until either price falls below or price goes up, and either one of these could actually get hit. So there's 37 and there's 44 and a half, and those are the two that I would really those 2 levels I would really pay attention to. The top of value 41.60 and the bottom of value, which you can see it labeled here, 41.46. So anyway, that's a lot of time to spend on this one. In terms of option activity, there were some nice runners. There's a little bit of Facebook calls in the beginning of the day. There wasn't anything really notable about the call activity today in Facebook. I know some people that what they like to do when they see a move, they like to pretend that there was option activity in it. There was small calls today in Facebook. It's just small calls in Facebook almost every day that get swept. It's not that big of a deal. But it got going on the story, I guess, about Zuckerberg and about them doing some changes to Instagram. I don't really trade Facebook often. I think it's too headline riddled. I would rather just spend, allocate my money other places. Even though I know Instagram is a big winner. 176.38 is a virgin point of control, so you may want to be aware of that it could do a little bit of digestion once it takes out that virgin point of control. I think Amazon, just to kind of cover them, because I did a video on them yesterday, a good example of why you want to sell maybe a little bit of premium against a trade that's working. And again, that video is what I put out last night after the close, but not of nothing day for Amazon flat. Netflix, I think, tried to get going a little bit. Still looks interesting. It's up 20 basis points. That was on my radar this morning. I did not trade it. Google also finished in between those names, up about 0.5%. So what else was I looking at today? I tell you, the casinos. We saw some calls in LVS today. I think 4,000 calls went up, but really nice continuation number 2 for Las Vegas Sands. Notice it does also have a virgin point of control up here at 66, so maybe another dollar to go before you hit some resistance in LVS. Win is another one. I mean, look at the move in Win just since this gap up after the Macau numbers, and we talked about the casinos in yesterday's video, but you're talking about 15 points. That's really nice. What is that? About a 12% move in 2 days in Win. Pretty nice. And I don't think, well, I guess maybe today a little bit more people noticed there was some chasing, what I call with the option activity. I think some of the just straight momentum, that's after kind of the tail end of a move. Well, I don't want to say that. I don't know tail end of a move, but there was calls that went up in a couple of these names. MLCO. That was one of the first ones that I saw today. Another name finished on the highs, up 2% and follow for tomorrow. They kind of all look the same, or all look similar, I should say, not the same. A few other names that we saw call activity in. A little bit more of BAC. We also saw some XLF and KRE calls this morning. There was a Goldman note out this morning talking about how they like the banks here. And I think they specifically mentioned XLF. So I don't know, maybe somebody read that note this morning and got involved in that. We saw some more ASHR calls. Gave everybody the heads up on that one earlier. NC, been watching this one. NEO, they came out with their auto sales. I didn't see where NEO closed. Up 3.44%. I looked at this one. So this was one, again, another one of these names where you have to, using a poker analogy or metaphor, you kind of have to play the best hands, because we are seeing a lot of option activity that I think is pretty good. I talked about that yesterday, but you can't play every one of these trades. It's impossible. You just can't monitor every single one. But as we get to the further down to the list, so again, ASHR. I'll look at this chart just for a second. There's a couple things to note here. If you go to the weekly bar here in ASHR, we are getting to this resistance of 30.49. That's about another dollar up. So it could definitely run a little bit more, but maybe on a pullback, you can get involved. By the way, look at the volume. The weekly volume really pick up in the Shanghai ETF. I think it looks a lot better. Yeah, notice that you also have, it's not a virgin point of control because the price has passed through the point of control. This one is a virgin point of control. That's up at 32. So again, it could be you've got resistance about another dollar up, dollar and a half. Probably 32 is something that I think is reasonable to target on the Shanghai ETF. This was mentioned, I think, on CNBC this morning or this afternoon. A couple other names. Excuse me. AMRN. This name has been pretty good on option activity. This is Amarin. It's gearing back up. It looks like it's right kind of in the middle of value. I see 22.77 as resistance if it gets above this range here. So I think pretty interesting. Sticking in this space, Sarepta. Now I don't know how you play this name. I really don't, because the calls are seriously wide, in it. So it may go up here and it's starting to kind of get out of this little mini downward channel. Look where it found support, 118. But if you're okay with playing stock, even in a higher price name, I think this is stock is the better way to go. And I know maybe it's a little bit more capital intensive, but you can control it a little bit better. Now, I don't know if they have data that's coming out in this name. Sometimes they trade options around it, but 118.34. But I looked, what they did, by the way, and again, you won't, I try to break this down so you can see how realistic this is. But first of all, they're giving plenty of time for this. August 150. So they're spending 855, right? This is, again, where's the implied volatility? It's a 56. I'm actually surprised that it's not higher for Sarepta. But you want to put this on your chart, right? So where's 155? Right at this peak. So I think that's definitely, that could happen, especially by August. But you have to ask yourself, do you want to spend $8.55 for a call that is that far out of the money? Now again, these biotech names, they can really move, but I don't know, is that the most efficient way to play it? And I don't know if I would really pick something outside of, in this case, the option activity, because the option market maker is just not going to make you a market. So you could maybe so what I would do is maybe structure something like maybe a 140, 150 call spread that goes out like a month or two. Maybe a couple months. But the problem is some of these options, they're like the Roach Motel. You can get in, but you can't get out. So it's really a challenge. I think it's important to bring up that it's a challenging trade to do in options. So when these guys, if this stock ends up going up to like 130, 140, in the next month, and somebody on Twitter brags about it, ask them if they're in it and how they executed it, because I don't I don't get these guys who who may not necessarily have a position, but then they'll brag about it when the stock goes up, because I really think it's a tough name to play, and I honestly don't know if I want to buy 100 or 200 shares and have to put a $25,000 investment into Sarepta on a name that I don't even know if they've got data out, right? So so these are all things to kind of think about in your decisioning, in your in your decision process, whether or not you want to take that trade. Again, so important. KSA, probably the best looking international ETF out there. This is the Saudi Arabia ETF, breaking out to new highs. And this is one of those ones where we've seen just a ton of positioning over the last couple months. And every time that we see calls go up, they're not going to the weeklies or even the front month calls. They go out. Now this one, I don't know 100% if they're adding to the position. But again, they're going out to June. So this one they give a couple months. Notice that the open interest is 21,000. So we've seen this trade hit the tape before. But again, best looking technical international ETF, in my opinion, out there, breaking out to 52-week highs. And again, if you don't want to trade the stock, it's a $33 stock. So a lot easier, I think, to kind of get your arms around. Especially this one, I was in this one for a while, and it's from the time that I saw the calls go up last time, it was right in here, and it did one of these on a headline, and I got out for a scratch, so I missed this leg up. I just did not have, talking about not having enough patience with AMD and also with this trade. But again, I will always share the ones that I get out of and they don't work for whatever reason. This, again, my fault. Nothing to do with the trade going wrong or anything like that. This is me just one of those days where I decided to reduce risk and got out of this before the last leg higher. And then finally, I'll leave it here with the option activity. There were some puts too as well. HIIQ, which we saw calls yesterday, some puts went up in this one. Also, big put buyer in MO. But the Qs saw some late day call buying in the QQQ. So just look at this chart. And these were pretty sizable trades. You never know with Qs if they're doing something on the other side of them. But when you see sweeps like this, you have to ignore the buy rights. Right? That means that for sure there's stock that's going against them. But take a look at this trade, 1.8 $8 million, went up 15 minutes before the close. And then there was another trade that happened. So this one was sweep and opening, really easy to read. This one had some open interest, June 192 calls, but this one up after 4 o'clock. Remember, you could trade some of the larger ETF index options or sectors till 4:15 in options. So they traded that one after 4 o'clock. All right, so that's kind of a wrap on the day. Just a few other names that I've been looking at. I talked about Okta, which I think is starting to move the right way. I'm still in Autodesk. Autodesk looks pretty good. I'm in a what am I in? 160, 170 calls. No. I'm in 155, 165 call spread. So this one is getting close to my to the upper end of the short strike. So this looks great for Autodesk. But a couple other names. We were talking. This was a name that was in the newsletter that I had. I think Workday. If you're looking for more names in this space, they're abundant. I think Workday ends up going here. It's getting pretty close. Remember, Workday had fine. Earnings were fine, but there's I'd say a good handful of these software names that ran up into their number, sold off on the print, and sold off right into support. This is the 50-day moving average. The two T's that I like to talk about as well. I think this team looks like it's trying to go as well. Actually, new 52-week high. I didn't see where it closed, but I tweeted that one out earlier. And then the other T is Twilio, right? So Team and Twilio, two of the strongest names out there. So I don't know. I have to think of a catchy name for the two T's, Twilio and Team. So that's it. So I think a little bit of a slow day with the averages, but there was certainly a number of grinding names that performed pretty well. So plenty of other names to talk about. We'll be doing that tomorrow morning. As always, I'll send out some setups to the TTG members in the private Twitter feed. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. One final note is that there will be no video tomorrow. I have to go to the dentist. Trust me, I'd much rather be shooting the video than go to the dentist, but it is what it is. Have a great night, everybody, and see you tomorrow.